Hello and welcome, dear listeners. You're tuning in to the ReGENERATE project podcast on regenerative agriculture. Join us as we explore new approaches to soil, landscape, and the future of farming. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Your host, Radim Kužel.
Hello, today we're heading to the Znojmo region, where the Farma Markových shows that a diverse crop rotation, thoughtful on-farm processing, and smart harvesting strategies can go hand in hand with regenerative principles. My guest is Jiří Marek from Farma Markových. We'll discuss how to build a diversified crop rotation in the conditions of South Moravia, how and why to add processing into your own operation, and we'll also look at two-phase harvesting, when it makes sense, for which crops, how it affects quality, and so on. Hi, Jirka.
Hi, Radim, and hello to the listeners.
What would you say about Farma Markových to someone who doesn't know it? How would you describe it?
Well, we farm in Unanov, which is a village a few kilometers from Znojmo, so in South Moravia. And we currently farm as a family on about 450 hectares, or a bit over 450. Out of that, about 25 hectares are permanent grasslands in a dry steppe regime, where we do extensive management with a flock of sheep, and the rest is arable land, which we farm regeneratively. We grow around 20 different crops and try to process as many of the seeds we grow as possible into some kind of products.
South Moravia, or the Znojmo region, is also known for being a drier area. What's the rainfall like for you?
Yes, that's right. The long-term average rainfall is around 470 to 500 millimeters. And the main problem isn't really the rainfall itself, but the high temperatures and longer periods of heat, when we can have 10 days in a row at 35 degrees, and that really affects the moisture conditions.
Is that one of the reasons you went down the path of regenerative agriculture? Or how did that idea start for you?
Yes, definitely. It's one of the reasons, but there are several. It's also the market situation, where our costs have been rising long-term, and the selling prices of commodities are what they are, like wheat at 400 crowns today. Even though we started regenerative farming about 4 years ago, when prices were better, it still makes sense to us, because we work better with the soil and with the risks related to climate change, which is clearly happening around us. So we're looking for ways to adapt, and this makes sense to us.
And now that you have 4 years of experience, do you have some numbers? For example, in terms of economics, fuel consumption, before versus now?
Definitely. The biggest savings are in machine wear and tear, because now we basically only drive on the fields with a seeder. That significantly reduced the number of service visits for maintenance. So now we spend about half of what we did maybe 6 years ago. Also, we didn't start regenerative farming from full ploughing. We had already been using strip till for 10 years before that. So this is another step forward toward gentler soil management. What also drives me is that I have a close relationship with nature, and when I walk across the field and dig into the soil, do a spade test, I can now count maybe 7, 8, 9 earthworms in one spade. When I go to neighboring fields where they cultivate intensively, I have to dig 10 times to find one worm, which shows that the soil is in a different condition. As for economics, cereals are completely problem-free in regenerative farming. Oil crops are a bit more difficult. There's some yield drop, maybe around 10%, but it's balanced by lower inputs.
So profitability, the profit of the sector, is the same or better than in conventional farming, even if yields are lower?
I think so. I don't have it calculated down to every detail, because I don't track every screw. But when I compare with neighboring farmers, we talk about yields and inputs, and it's very similar. Sometimes they're better, sometimes we are, and I'd say it's about equal. I don't see any major difference.
All right. And you mentioned you grow 20 crops, which is quite a lot. How do you structure your crop rotation? How do you rotate crops so they follow each other well? What's the idea behind it?
I'm not entirely sure how to explain it. It's a bit tricky. The mainstream agriculture is simpler. Those systems are already planned. But I do it more based on what I need to grow, while still following basic principles. Alternating winter and spring crops, improving crops and cereals. So I keep rotating like that. We grow 20 crops, but many of them are quite similar. For example, cereals, wheat, oats, canary seed, millet. It's all cereals and managed similarly. Oil crops like sunflower, safflower, milk thistle. They're also similar groups, so it doesn't feel that complicated to me.
So rotation, and of course you also include cover crops.
Yes, we do them intensively. That's what it's all based on. They build the soil structure.
Do you have plans to expand your product range in the future?
Yes, lots of plans. Right now we're putting a de-hulling machine into operation, so we'll start de-hulling seeds. There are no Czech millet groats on the market, so we want to try that. We'll de-hull sunflower seeds, hemp seeds, and we'll see what else works. We'll sell the de-hulled products directly and also develop new products from them. I won't reveal everything yet, but we have plenty of ideas, more than we can actually implement.
Great, we're looking forward to those. You also mentioned two-phase harvesting. Just to explain for listeners, it's a harvest method where the crop is first cut and left in rows or on the ground to dry, then collected later with a combine. Why did you choose this method, and what results are you seeing?
We grow crops that need drying, and drying is expensive. This method offered a solution. I saw it somewhere a few years ago. Two-phase harvesting isn't new, but it's been reintroduced.
It's actually something that was used historically, but then faded away.
Exactly. Historically, grain was cut into bundles, lentils were pulled out, dried in rows, and then threshed. That's old. What's new is the equipment. Today you can mount a header on a tractor in the front 3-point hitch, and it works like a combine header but lays the crop into rows. It dries there and is later picked up by a combine. I'm really enthusiastic about this method because it significantly reduces harvest losses, evens out ripening, and eliminates the need for desiccation. There are only a few desiccants available anyway, and they don't work on all crops. For example, they don't work on grasses like millet. We've tested that even if it rains, say 20 millimeters, the crop still dries well because it's laid in one direction. The heads stick up and airflow is good. I was worried about it at first, but it works really well. Fuel consumption is low, around 5 to 7 liters per hectare, depending on the crop. I think it has a future, especially in alternative farming systems. For seed production fields, definitely.
Or actually, it can also be used for organic farming.
Yes, that too. It's much better for the combine because once it dries in the windrow, dry material goes into the combine and it threshes completely differently. It's dry. I always had to dry millet before, but now we harvest millet with 10 to 11% moisture. I can't even imagine harvesting hemp without this because it's always green. And if we wait for it to fully mature, it becomes problematic. This applies to many other crops too. So you can basically cut it earlier by about 2 to 3 weeks, let it dry in the windrow, the ripening evens out, and then you collect it. At first I was afraid of it, but even soft seeds, when cut, dry out beautifully in the windrow within about 14 days and are harvested perfectly. The germination rate is incredible, like 98%.
And how do you determine the timing of that first cut? How do you decide?
When the seed starts to harden, when it reaches the wax ripeness stage, it's the right time to cut it.
So still relatively high moisture.
It's actually much earlier than it looks like it could be harvested. The nutrients from the plant, from the stem, finish maturing into the seed. There are apparently enough nutrients there for the seed to fully mature. We tested it last year. Near a forest, there was a completely green strip of crimson clover. You could crush it between your fingers. It was completely soft. But after 10 days in the windrow, we harvested it beautifully dry, and there was no issue with germination at all. So don't be afraid to cut the crop 2 to 3 weeks earlier and put it into the windrow.
And which crops are you harvesting this way? Quite a lot of crops. Pretty much everything. Or what don't you harvest like this?
Well, we haven't tried cereals or rapeseed yet, but things like crimson clover, radish, peas, hemp, as I mentioned, millet, phacelia, buckwheat, I'm probably forgetting something, but I think we've done around 8 crops like this.
A lot of people see the risk in leaving it in the windrow. Rain comes, maybe even heavy rainfall. What's your experience with that?
Yeah, I was afraid of that too, like I said earlier. We had about 20 millimeters of rain on it, and if the sun comes out, within 3 to 5 days, you can hardly tell anything happened. A big advantage is that in the windrow, when it's lying there, the seeds don't fall out. Compared to desiccation, like with crimson clover, when you desiccate it, the plant becomes brittle due to the chemical. And because of gravity or wind, it can fall out. It happened to me before. 2 days before harvest, a strong wind came and the seeds just fell to the ground. But in the windrow, it lies there and holds together better. Even during storms or strong winds, it doesn't fall out. It stays nicely in place. The seeds are supported against each other in the row, and it holds together really well. I'm honestly surprised it's not used much more widely.
And what experience do you have so far? How do you make the mixtures? Timing of sowing? How does it fit into your crop rotation?
To me, it feels very simple. We harvest a crop with a combine, and within a few days, up to a week, depending on conditions and time, we go in with the seeder and sow a mix directly into the stubble. We compose the mix from seeds we grow ourselves. About 20% of our land is used for seed multiplication plots, plus we buy some seeds from seed companies, so we play around with it like that. It doesn't seem complicated to me. Of course, we include legumes and some deep-rooting species like safflower or radish. The mix usually has around 8 components. I don't go too high like 14 species, but always at least 5, usually between 5 to 10. I mostly use frost-kill species because out of our 400 hectares of arable land, about 100 hectares are sown in autumn and 300 in spring. So in spring we sow a lot. Since most of our crops are spring crops, those 300 hectares are basically always cover crops that winter kill. Throughout spring we keep sowing continuously, from early spring up to mid-May. So the whole spring period is a sequence of sowing. Harvest is similar. We start with crimson clover and finish with sorghum in November, so we don't have a sharp peak, but rather harvest something every week.
And sowing 300 hectares in spring directly, without tillage, is probably less time-consuming than doing soil preparation.
Definitely, we only sow. But our biggest weakness or dilemma is timing, figuring out when to go into the field. Others who cultivate already have dry soil, while ours is still cold and wet. Ideally, that's the time to go away for 2 weeks, so you don't have to watch it. It seems best in regenerative farming to start sowing when others' crops are already emerging. Then the soil is ready. If you sow legumes too early, it doesn't work well.
And during the transition, did you make any mistakes? Anything you'd recommend others avoid?
Exactly what I just mentioned. You shouldn't rush spring sowing. Last year I sowed flax early, at the beginning of March, and then I sowed another 2 hectares, maybe 3 weeks or a month later. In the end, the later one performed better, because the early one went into wet conditions, got cold and sealed over, even if it didn't look like it at first. So that's the key thing, to learn the right timing. In autumn we sow wheat in the second half of October, and that works fine. It also helps reduce weed pressure.
And the cover crop can stay on the field a bit longer.
Yes, although we don't often sow wheat after cover crops. For example, we sow crimson clover, then millet, harvest it in mid-October, and then immediately sow wheat. So something is always growing. It seems that when you sow later, mice are less active. This autumn there were quite a lot of mice, but since we sow later, the wheat is small and not very attractive, so they don't have much food. There's a big concern about mice in regenerative systems because of crop residues. But this year, even fields that were cultivated twice or 3 times had almost the same number of mice as ours. Even after ploughing, there were mice, so I didn't see much difference between regenerative and conventional fields.
Have you experienced a really severe mouse outbreak in regenerative farming?
Yes, I have. They completely ate my crimson clover and 1 field of rapeseed. I had to switch to another crop there. But since we grow many crops, we can always adjust. There's an economic loss, of course, but replacing the crop is still cheaper than applying large amounts of poison like Stutox. It's expensive and not that effective. Works in moderate cases, but not in outbreaks. You poison them, and in 2 or 3 weeks, they're back.
Personally, what I observe is that people usually have the biggest problem in the first or second year during the transition. Maybe because the system changes suddenly, so there's more space for voles, the soil isn't disturbed, and they multiply. But then it seems to me that the populations stabilize quite a bit.
Yeah, that's how it was. There was that big wave at the time when we started, so we'll see how it goes next time.
But that was in conventional farming too.
Yeah, it was everywhere. We probably had a bit more, that's true, but we'll see when the next wave comes how it looks.
All right, now let's move from the field to what happens with the commodity after harvest. Since you mentioned the prices are low nowadays, it might be important to process part of the production or sell it directly. You process products directly on the farm, sell directly, and you also have an e-shop. What exactly do you process, and why did you start doing it?
We were looking for a way to process some of our products, and we decided on oil pressing. Then, for the seeds, we reconstructed a post-harvest processing line. We grow the seeds and mix them into feed mixtures for ornamental birds and pigeons. That's one branch. The second branch is the oils, and the third branch is food products, where we're now starting to supply restaurant chains and farm shops with lentils. We currently press 10 types of oil from the seeds we grow. The only thing we don't grow is pumpkin, but we cooperate with a neighbor on that. Everything else we grow ourselves and press. For restaurants, it's mainly oils and lentils. And during pressing, we also get secondary products. From the sediment, we make hemp paste, pumpkin paste, and hemp pumpkin flax flour, which is gluten-free and in demand. So we manage to process the seed completely. Some is sold as feed, some is pressed, and even the byproducts are used. We can sell everything. This approach makes sense to us because just growing commodities is probably not sustainable in the long term, especially for smaller farms. Commodities like wheat, corn, or rapeseed can always be imported into Europe cheaper from somewhere else with better conditions. So we're looking for these alternative paths.
How did you choose the oil press itself? Its size, the initial investment, the return, and also the time demands of processing.
We've been doing it for 5 years now. We don't have a very big press, but not a small one either. We bought one from Germany with a capacity of about 100 kilograms per hour. There is a Czech manufacturer too, but it's harder to press hard seeds with those machines. Some seeds are quite hard, like milk thistle or safflower, so we needed something that could handle that. That's why we chose this option. We've been pressing for 5 years, and every year we do more. Last year, we pressed about 3,000 litres of oil, while in the first year it was only around 400 to 500 litres. So each year we grow by roughly a third.
And what about quality aspects? Cleaning, drying, storage, inspections. What would someone need to arrange if they wanted to start?
We are under the supervision of the Food Inspection Authority. Since we don't produce huge volumes, inspections aren't too intense. We invited an inspector at the beginning, agreed on requirements, and set things up accordingly. We have a washable pressing room. She comes once a year, checks if our HACCP system is in order and if everything is still as it should be. We also have a seed dryer up to 40 degrees Celsius, because many of the seeds we harvest are a bit wet, so they need drying. We also bought a header for two-phase harvesting, which helps with that. So now we can handle the whole process ourselves, from harvest, drying, cleaning to pressing. At the beginning, we outsourced some steps, but we were never satisfied with the quality. I'm also proud of regenerative farming in this sense, because the oils and seeds we produce have better nutritional values. It's not really evaluated much here, but in the United States it's studied more deeply. And we get a lot of positive feedback from customers. I'd simply say the difference in taste between conventional and regenerative products is like the difference between a homemade egg and a supermarket egg.
Are customers already familiar with regenerative agriculture, or are you educating them? What's their perception?
The journey is long. We're at a stage where we educate customers from scratch. We have to build our customer base, explain everything, let them taste it, and they gradually realize the quality and health benefits. Awareness is key, and that's how we grow demand. It's a long-term process. You can't just put a product on a shelf and expect it to sell. That doesn't work for us. When we do that, almost nothing sells. But we organize farm days and attend markets, and that's how our products gain visibility. That approach works for us.
You also mentioned supplying restaurants or restaurant chains. How do they perceive it? Was that a reason they started working with you?
Definitely. More conscious, usually higher-end restaurants carefully choose their suppliers, and they really like our regenerative approach. Chefs even come to visit the farm to see how we operate, how the fields look, how we grow cover crops. That's what attracts them. And interestingly, they usually find us themselves. We've found that this works better than actively approaching them, because they receive many offers. When they find us, the communication is on a completely different level.
And what about performance? For example, hectares per hour, including harvesting.
We have a working width of 6.5 meters, and we can do about 30 hectares per day with it. The combine can harvest almost the same amount, actually a bit faster. Of course, there are situations with huge biomass where you can't go too fast. Then maybe it's around 20 hectares per day. But generally, with that width, 20 to 30 hectares per day is doable.
And farmers around you, when they see it, are they interested? Do you maybe offer it as a service?
Yes, we do offer it as a service, and actually, it seems like I don't even have time to keep up with demand in the area. So the technology itself is old, but the machine is new. It's not very well known in this tractor-mounted form. There are self-propelled machines, but this tractor version is relatively affordable. So I think it has great potential. Especially nowadays, when seeds can be sold abroad fairly well, every farm can find a crop that suits them and use this method to cope with low prices. Seed production holds its value better, and with two-phase harvesting, we can reduce costs. Less drying needed, harvest dry material, fewer losses.
And for seed producers, it's more interesting too, thanks to the higher germination rates.
Yes, that's a huge benefit. I consistently see germination rates about 10% higher than with other methods.
You also mentioned cooperation with neighboring farmers. Are you an inspiration for them in terms of regenerative agriculture, or not yet?
They mostly observe us. It's really about a mindset shift, and I think in about 20 years, everyone will be doing it. We've seen it in Spain and France. There, regenerative agriculture is about 20 years ahead of us here in the Czech Republic. Some individuals started it, and now there are regions where everyone does it.
In Spain, they were basically forced into it by climate conditions.
Yes, by natural conditions. But what Spain had 30 years ago is now starting to appear here. Climate change is moving toward us, especially to South Moravia. And I think eventually everyone will realize it's unnecessary to intensively cultivate the soil. When I go to the field in spring and dig 20 centimeters deep with my hands, the whole soil profile is soft and richtig, loose. It almost feels wrong to go over it with machinery and disturb it. You just seed into it and it grows normally. It also applies to rapeseed, though there, strip till works slightly better, but the difference isn't that big.
Of course, it also depends on the soil condition. Rapeseed is more sensitive than, say, wheat.
Yes, it's more sensitive, and small seeds in general are more sensitive. For example, poppy. That's honestly a bit of a challenge in crop residues. Spring poppy.
What's the issue there? Emergence or establishment?
The problem is the crop residues. The seed is about 1 millimeter, and when there are residues, the poppy often lies in the residues instead of the soil. Then emergence is more problematic, but even this can be solved. We now use a method where we pass over the field once with an empty seeder. It kind of clears it a bit. And if you have precise RTK navigation, you can go over the same line again and actually seed into a row where residues have been removed. That first pass slightly disturbs the soil, warms it up a bit, and that seems to work well. Yes, you have to go over it twice, but even with conventional tillage, you often pass twice anyway.
Have you also changed your approach to fertilization or crop protection under regenerative agriculture?
Yes, we reduced fertilizer doses by about 30 to 50%. Definitely at least 30%. For wheat, we now apply about 120 kilograms instead of 180 kilograms, and yields are the same. The only difference is about 0.5% lower protein content. But today, that doesn't matter much because feed and food wheat prices are almost the same. Test weight is 780 to 800, often over 800, for years now. I attribute that to the soil. Because it's not over-fertilized, it maintains better structure and can transfer its soil strength into the grain. I see neighboring farmers applying 180 kilograms, but they struggle more with test weight, around 740 to 760, with similar yields. I attribute this to the diverse crop rotation and cover crops, which build soil fertility and make nutrients more available to plants.
So soil with good structure probably also supports better root growth. Do you monitor that?
Definitely. I'm constantly walking fields with a spade, ours and the neighbors. Of course, I also have moments of doubt whether I'm doing it right. It's a process. You have to keep exploring regenerative practices and observing closely. But the difference in soil structure is absolutely huge compared to intensively tilled land. We practically don't have erosion. The soil doesn't wash away. It stays loose all the time.
And in your case, erosion is mainly wind erosion, right?
Yes, wind erosion, but also water erosion. Even a 3-degree slope is enough. Our land isn't very hilly, but if you have a field that's a kilometer long with that slope, water will still flow during a storm. You can see it clearly when it rains 30 millimeters in half an hour. The water runs toward the road. But in our fields, you can immediately see that nothing is flowing off. In fact, water coming from neighboring fields often soaks in within 30 to 50 meters and doesn't continue further. The only problem is that herbicides sometimes flow in from neighboring fields.
And soil washes in too. You also work with agroforestry on part of your land, right? Or you have a project under the agroforestry subsidy program. How do you approach the landscape overall? Do you plant hedgerows as well? How do you think about landscape design?
Let me go back a bit. I started thinking about regenerative agriculture when I was spraying rapeseed. I don't even remember what it was, probably stem weevils in spring. And suddenly, a flock of partridges flew up, then another one about 300 meters further. And at that moment, I realized something wasn't right. They were eating those pests for me, and I was spraying insecticide on their heads, driving them away and poisoning them. So I stopped doing that. Now I apply just one insecticide in rapeseed. Normally people apply something in autumn, something in spring, maybe 5 treatments. I use just one, and even that I think might not be necessary. As I reduced fertilization, I apply about 120 kilograms in rapeseed, there are fewer pests and diseases. The crop is less attractive, the canopy isn't as lush, it doesn't smell as much, so there are fewer pests. Of course, there are still some. Stems get damaged. But we get yields around 3.2 tonnes per hectare. And where they apply 5 insecticides, 3 fungicides, and 200 kilograms of nitrogen, they might get about 0.4 tonnes more. But when you calculate the costs, we come out slightly better. As for the landscape, this was the beginning. Then I realized it's important to diversify the landscape as much as possible, especially here in the Znojmo region. So we planted 5.5 hectares of trees. It's not huge compared to our total area, but we want to add more this year. We planted them in 24-metre strips, matching the sprayer width, and we still grow crops between them. I really like it. It belongs in the landscape. It doesn't have to be everywhere, but I think there should be tree rows along roads wherever possible, and also shrub layers. Because we're seeing more predators, birds of prey, weasels, all sorts of animals that help control mice. I know the argument that grassy strips increase mice populations, but the more diversity we bring into the landscape, the more natural balance we get, and we won't have to deal with pests in a one-sided way. It balances itself over time. We saw this in France. Yes, they have mice, but it never reaches catastrophic levels that would destroy yields. It stays manageable.
Exactly. And those tree and shrub layers provide natural habitats for predators, both flying and ground-based.
Yes, and also insect predators for pests like pollen beetles or stem weevils.
How did you choose the species for those tree rows and shrubs?
We partly did it to meet legal requirements, but for fruit trees, we chose species that grow well here. Things we know we'll eventually be able to harvest, even in an extensive way, and maybe use in our products. So we planted cherries, apricots. Apricots do okay here, especially on slopes where they're less exposed to frost. In valleys, late spring frosts are a problem. We also planted plums, green gages, some pears. Apples not really, they don't do well here. Then forest trees, maple, service tree, and also some temporary trees. We planted it a bit denser, knowing that after about 5 years we'll remove some to give space to others. For example, linden and aspen. Those are meant to be cut later to make room. The public reaction has been very positive. People like it. I think it belongs in the landscape, and the more of it there is, the better.
Hopefully it inspires more farmers to move toward regenerative agriculture or agroforestry and plant more trees and shrubs along fields. Thank you for the interview. As a final question, do you have any message for farmers who are still hesitating about regenerative agriculture? Where should they look for inspiration?
There's a lot of inspiration nowadays. You can find plenty online. Even here in Czechia, there are already quite a few farms where people can get inspired. And my message, don't be afraid of regenerative agriculture. In my opinion, it's the path to the future. There's no point in constantly producing more and more because there's already plenty of raw materials. It's better to focus on efficiency and long-term sustainability.
Both environmental and economic sustainability.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Project ReGENERATE is funded by the European Union. Views and opinions expressed are, however, those of the authors only and do not necessarily reflect those of the European Union or the European Education and Culture Executive Agency. Neither the European Union nor the Executive Agency can be held responsible for them.